It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. Logan, it feels like we haven't done this in a while because we did one literally every day last week. We actually able to enjoy the weekend. Didn't have to talk into a microphone. But this is a podcast that certainly I have been looking forward to doing. I'm sure everybody.
You've been looking forward to it?
I mean,
you're a sick man.
We are on a search for answers. With answers to the question of what the hell's going on out there? The old Vince Lombardi clip. That is kind of what I want to figure out is hopefully in the next 45 minutes on our tape review show that we do every week here on Take Command is like get a better understanding of what happened against the Bears, because a 40-20 loss against the team that had previously been pretty unanimously seen as the worst in football. Congratulations, Broncos, on taking over that title. Is I would say unacceptable if you want to be who you want to be in terms of what the Commanders want to be, and figuring out what went wrong and ultimately fixing it is their job. But we can at least do the what went wrong part, the diagnosis here on the show, and give a couple of ideas on what we think they may do in terms of fixing it. So I'm excited to have to take a look under the hood.
I got you. Yeah. I mean, it was, man, excited is not what I'm feeling. It just was like such a gross game. I think players probably feel the same way. And it's just one of those things that's so frustrating as a fan of the team to kind of watch and be like, oh man, like I can't believe this happened, or why did they do this or whatever. So yeah, we're going to get into it, but it was a frustrating game to revisit. I think there's a lot of, like, to your point, kind of things that are very insightful about kind of revisiting the game. But yeah, man, it wasn't very pretty. And, I thought the offense played, well in the second half. Even that was a little bit up and down in my opinion. So it's got a lot of stuff to talk about for sure. So
what can I say, Logan? I just love learning.
That's what this
is about. I just love learning about what went wrong. Okay. So let's start with the defense, because that has obviously been the point of discussion mostly over the last bunch of days. High level thoughts, as we always start with before we dive into some of the plays, into some of the details, and ask some tough questions. Like, if I say, like, hey, what went wrong? Guy comes up to you at your son's hockey games, like, hey man, what happened against the Bears? What's the quick answer?
Yeah, what I would probably say to that guy that ran.
Like, leave me alone. I'm trying to watch my guy watch some or play some
hockey. I would say that a little bit of everything went wrong, and it's really hard when that's the answer, but ultimately that's the truth. Like, when I look at it, I kind of say to myself, there's a little bit of everything. Like, so I think there's this I had this notion when I left the game on Thursday night that the defensive line didn't play very well. Even in our recap pod, that the defensive line didn't play very well. But when I was watching and I was counting the pressures, because I count them independently of like PFF, I'm like, that's a pressure, that's a win. And I go down and I was like, man, there's like a ton of pressure that the D line was able to generate, specifically Chase Young. And then I go check the PFF numbers, and they're crazy good in terms of pressure, but it didn't feel that way. And then you kind of go back and you say on the explosive plays. So, obviously the one that St. Juice gives up to Moore, the one that Percy Butler's playing that cover 2, there's no pressure. So it's like on the most impactful plays of the game, despite the D-line playing pretty good, like Montez Sweat had a really good game, very physical in the run, made some nice tackles for loss, great in pursuit. Payne flashed quite a bit. Chase, he was awesome in this game. Like, I don't know if he's always in the perfect gap and playing the correct technique, but in terms of generating pressure on number 75, a guy that we thought he'd be able to generate a ton of pressure on, he did a great job. And it didn't kind of click with the back end. And I think that's the thing that's most frustrating, despite these great individual performances and really just general solid play from the defensive line in those moments where they needed to be very productive in terms of pass rush. They weren't. Now, again, Chicago deserves some credit for that because they've schemed up opportunities. So, for example, on the St. Juice one, which is a 3rd and 9, like, they've got chip help.
First drive, 3rd and 9, yeah.
Yeah, they're working. They've got chip help, backs helping the left tackle, tight ends helping the right tackle. They're working the slide to Payne. So there's a double team on Payne. There's essentially a double team on Sweat, and there's a double team on Montez. And so you'd say, it'd be nice if John could win his one-on-one there. And I think something's going on with John. He looks a little bit tired. Short week. He's an older player. Maybe something's going on there. But
yeah, I've been wondering for a couple of weeks now if that plantar fasciitis is either still bothering him in his foot, or if the lack of conditioning from training camp, because he was not out there for the back half of training camp, is affecting him in a major way. So yeah, I'm hoping that over this this little mini bye, John Allen's feeling a lot better.
And, like they've got a new schedule now. EB's kind of running a more vigorous practice tempo. All those things have an effect. And you have to talk to John about it. But there are times where I'm like, man, like this is not the guy that we've come to know and love over the last couple of years. He's playing fine. It's just that dominant pass rush performance doesn't seem to be there. So, and again, so good protection by them. They understand where their weaknesses are. They're playing man coverage. St. Juice kind of does a good job at the line of scrimmage, undercuts as more stems to the inside edge of the numbers. He's thinking dig. He plays the dig. It's a double move. It's a big play over the top, but there was no pass rush there. And I think the same thing with the Percy Butler play on the touchdown. It's Percy's reading eyes. He's aggressively reading eyes. And one of the things is Fields is perfectly statuesque in the pocket. He looks down the middle, it feels like for 2 seconds, and then just switches his eyes late and throws the ball to Moore. And so I want to be mad at Percy. I want to be like, hey, man, what are you doing? But I know they coach those guys in cover 2 to read eyes. I know the weakness of the coverage is the Mike linebacker carrying the receiver up the middle of the field. All those things are true. Why is it a problem? Because the pass rush doesn't get home. But then there's other plays where the pass rush is amazing. So I think that was the thing that really stuck out to me. It's like when the D-line was excellent, those plays they don't become anything. It's like one of those things where because it's a sack or it's a TFL or whatever, and it's just like, oh, that's another play for the defensive line. The bad plays, the rush didn't show up, and obviously Chicago deserves credit for that because they protected it well. But I think that was the biggest takeaway. It's like that connection we're always talking about between the pass rush and the coverage just didn't sync up, and despite the rush being good, and by every metric you look at, it was very good. And I know that's confounding for fans. Shoot, Craig, that was confounding for me. But when you watch every clip, you're like, this is good. I'm not going to give this a negative grade as a whole. But again, when you watch film, that's why the context is so important. In the biggest moments, it didn't show up. And I think that's the thing that was really frustrating about it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, right. Like that's what it is. And that's those plays. I won't make William work too hard to bleep a billion of what I just said, but like the explosive plays kill you because they overcome the good stuff that you can do. Just like in the same way offensively, like if you're in 3rd and 19, but you hit a 40-yard gain, like it doesn't matter how you got in 3rd and 19 anymore. It's done. It's over with. You got the first down and possibly a touchdown. Like that's the issue here is that when you give up this many explosive plays, it doesn't matter what you do on the other downs. Like it literally does not matter. You can play perfect defense on 1st and 2nd down. You give up a big one on 3rd down and your work is gone. And that's why consistency is king on defense. And it's been a problem, I would say, so far this year. And I think that there's a couple of schematic choices that we can examine of whether or not moving forward, they need to be tweaked to help out that consistency, and specifically on 3rd down. Ron talked about it on Monday, like when they went back and looked at the film and the analytics, whatever analytics Ron is looking at, they're like, oh yeah, 3rd down is a big area where we could have been better on both sides of the ball.
Sure.
But on defense, it's like, okay, well, they've got 3rd and long. Can we bring some blitz pressure so we know that there's not enough time to get the routes down the field? Yeah. Like those are the kinds of questions. Or, if you notice they're using a bunch of chip help, well, let's take those guys and put them in one-on-ones because we're bringing 7. Like if you trust your back end, which it seemed like they did in this game, because they played a ton of man coverage, then let's use some extra pressure and make Justin Fields think about where he's got to go with the ball a little bit more versus going like, oh, this is man, I've got time. Where's DJ Moore? Because again, like, at the end of the day, and whether they knew this would be the case going in or not, like no one would thought this kind of skew would be true, but 3 players caught passes from Justin Fields. That's it. 2 tight ends and DJ Moore. And so eventually at some point in the game, like, do you make that adjustment of being like, okay, we got to make sure that we have extra help on DJ Moore. He's the only guy that's killing us. And like, those are the kinds of schematic things that it's a lot easier here on this Tuesday, 5 days after the game, with the benefit of tape and hindsight and analysis or data, all that kind of stuff to see. But also that is why these guys get paid a lot of money to try to realize and make these things happen in games. And unfortunately, that's not what happened last Thursday.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that, again, schematically, that was a little bit confounding. And I think, something I would have done, I think something Jack would have done is probably played a little bit less man. I just look at it, I'm like, man, they were in man so much. And you mentioned that only 3 receivers got passes. Mooney had an explosive play that was missed on the first play of the game. And then I want to say it was the 3rd or 4th play of the next drive where it's a big out, and he basically makes St. Juice fall down, and they missed that one too. So despite the only 3 guys catching the football, there was many opportunities for more explosive plays, which is crazy to think about. So I just feel like I probably would have played a touch more zone or a touch more man match. If you're looking for a more aggressive zone coverage, maybe a little bit more man match, just to kind of help those guys be in a little bit better position. Like you said, it was surprising. We talked about there are advantages to playing man coverage, especially if you think your personnel's better. But I don't think I was expecting the volume of man coverage. And, that might have been a game plan specific thing. Like, if you think your personnel's better, go for it. Let's run a lot of man. Let's be aggressive. Let's make him hold the football. But if you're going to do that, the rush has to get home in a very specific way. And I just felt like, not like we just talked about, that didn't always execute the way I think the staff hoped, obviously.
Yeah, I think that too, that again, like we've got the benefit of hindsight, but we did say this before, whatever, like, apologists this or, Monday morning quarterback that, like, it's just, here's the analysis, right? If I'm in that position as Jack Del Rio, I understand, and I have a temptation to go, our personnel is better. Let's man up. Let's get after it. Like, let's set an aggressive tone, all of that. But at the end of the day, I look at what the weakness is of that opponent, and I don't trust Justin Fields to consistently beat me in a bunch of cloud coverages, like without explosive plays, soft zone coverage. And that's boring, and it requires patience. And, guys like Emmanuel Forbes don't always have patience, as we'll talk about. But like at the end of the day, I'm making them beat me with long drives. And not giving up explosives is my number one priority. And instead, even if there's sound logic as to why they made the decision, they missed that key point with the strategy that they implemented. And I think that's the frustrating thing, is like, do you see the forest through the trees kind of deal, where it's like, okay, what's the number one thing? What's the easiest way we lose? Giving up explosive plays. Okay, so how do we mitigate that risk? To me, it'd be playing a lot more soft zone against a team that, you have a big armed, super twitchy quarterback, but he's not super consistent with his accuracy. Although Fields deserves a lot of credit. Fields played like, if we're doing this podcast for the Bears, we're giving Justin Fields literally the best grade he's probably ever had in his entire career. He was awesome. Like the throw to Moore to beat Kendall Fuller, like that's insane. It's so good. But I would have made him do that. And you talk about the explosives that he missed. And like, that's kind of the thing, is he's going to miss a fair amount. How do you make him earn it time and time and time again? And the Commanders just didn't do that on Thursday.
I think even in certain situations, I think it was the 3rd or 4th drive, Forbes misses a tackle. And like, that's something, if you're going to play, and I think they were in some version of man there, some version of match. So again, not totally in line with your point, but if you're going to make them go length of the field, you got to make tackles. And
that's true too.
That was one of the most frustrating plays for me, because it's like, it was 3rd and 10, just tackle the guy. It's 3rd and 2, and you're living to play another day, but you miss the tackle, ends up being an explosive play. They get points off that. And I just think like that was kind of the game for me. There was like St. Juice on the first explosive, I think is doing what he's supposed to do. It looks right to me. You're trusting the rush is going to get home. You're attacking the dig. Rush doesn't get there. Double move ends up being a big play. I think Percy's doing what he's supposed to do, but it ends up being a big play. Just do what you're supposed to do, like consistently. Trust your teammates. And I think that was the thing with that Forbes play that was so frustrating, because that's all in his control, in my opinion. Just make that tackle and we're in a better spot. So, but I agree. I think your analysis is spot on. I think with the Bears, when you watch them against Denver, one of the things that stuck out is that they were able to find explosive plays against that Denver defense. It wasn't super consistent or methodical. It was, we're going to run a keeper, and Moore is going to break we're going to kind of get this, they're going to bust a coverage. Moore's going to be open. He's going to make it a 30-yard gain. We're more likely to score points. And I just felt like that was something that if I'm the Commanders, I'm like, I'm going to avoid. I'm going to try to avoid that at all costs. So again, they don't play a lot of true zone, the Commanders, like this season. They don't. It's more matched. But they have coverages that have more of a zone element to it while it's being matchy and being very aggressive. And I think I probably would have leaned more into that stuff. I think, and they might have been. It's really hard to tell, so I don't want to be making these declarations. But I think something a little bit more conservative probably would have been appropriate. And that being said, though, the touchdown comes in Tampa too. Like, come on.
Right.
Like that, you don't get a more conservative coverage than that, honestly. So there was so it's easy to be like, play more conservative, but the conservative stuff led to big plays too. And not, I think, less consistently than the man stuff, but that just to prove a point there. And I really think what it comes down to is kind of that point or that observation that Ron had is I think your defensive line is playing well, but what can you do to kind of shift the deck? It would be my question, to help them in those situations, make sure they can generate pressure, to ensure pressure on 3rd and 9, because your coverage structure is relying on that pressure to come. And if it doesn't come from those front 4 guys, again, they're great. Like Chase Young, I think, had like a 92 by PFF, which for people,
he did 92 PFF pass
which
rush
is
grade.
an insane grade. Like that's like you're best in the NFL. Like
PFF had him at a 11 total pressures, 1 sack, 3 hits, 7 hurries, 1 batted ball.
Yeah, I mean, and that show. I mean, and that's not just PFF, because sometimes PFF they count like screens and weird stuff where they get free. He was excellent against that guy. But to ensure that you get that pressure when you got to have it, is there stuff we can do? Can we get to a 3-man surface on a pass rush once in a while? Like they've been pretty good about getting to 2 3s, which helps John and Allen, kind of ensure those one-on-ones. But can we get to an overload? Can we work a stunt? Like, think about all the stuff we see from our opponents in terms of finding ways to create one-on-ones on the defensive line and create pressures and simulating pressures. And I know they've done that. We saw them do it in training camp. It's just for whatever reason in the game, there's kind of this belief, I want to say, or confidence in your players to make plays when you got to make them. And I think as a coach, like, one of your jobs is to make sure that you're getting the production you want when you need it. And so what can they do? I think that's very, very aware of Ron. I think that's the right approach. Is these guys are playing well, but we got to ensure that in these situations we get the result we're looking for. And how do we make that happen, I think?
Yeah. And so like the calculus there, just to go into it a little deeper, like sending blitzes means you have less players in coverage.
100%.
And like that's the risk reward thing that Jack and Ron and that staff is placing. But as a quarterback, if you don't know where the pressure's coming from, like finding out where they're one short is hard, and it's got to happen quickly because the pressure's coming. And like, that's, to me, is a sacrifice that if you execute your blitz as well, is well worth taking. And if it's going to potentially line up a Chase Young, a Montez Sweat, a Daron Payne, a John Allen for a quick win because they can no longer get double teamed, that's worth to me being 1 short or even 2 short in the right distances on the back end, right down a distance on the back end. Because if it's 3rd and 14, for instance, like, you don't have time to diagnose and throw a deep shot down the field unless you're like launching one lollipopped off your back foot.
Right.
Like, there's not enough time to have the plays develop downfield to take advantage of them being that shorthanded on the back end. Like, that's the calculus. That's that sliding scale of time, resources dedicated to pressure versus coverage that you're making. And I think that there's opportunities moving forward for this team to be more aggressive on the pressure side of that calculus and unlock all this stuff we're talking about without putting yourself at risk for a back end that is struggling. Like, it sounds counterintuitive because you're taking resources away from the back end that is struggling, where you have a front that's actually playing perhaps better than people realize. But to actually achieve the goal, you're actually not hurting them. You're helping them because you make their job easier.
Well, and even to like simplify it, even more than that, obviously you're talking about bringing pressure, and that's important, right? Bringing 5-man rushes, 6-man rushes. That's a part of bringing pressure. But I also think there's simpler ways, and maybe less ways that are less risky, that you could also employ, right? We've talked about simulated pressure, and one of the things that teams have done to the Commanders, like, think about the stuff that the Bills did. they're not always bringing 5 men. They're bringing 4 men, but they're just kind of changing the pattern. And
Right.
by changing the pattern and understanding the protection rules of the opponent, you're able to kind of maximize your rush opportunity. And you got to call it in the right situation. And the guys got to be smart. They got to say, oh, this is how they set their slide. They set their slide to the passing strength, or they set their slide away from the back. If you know that they're going to do that, I can ensure the 2-man side. And again, this is a little bit different because, Chicago, I think they understood where the Commanders' bread was buttered, and they did a really good job of making sure we got, we got all these protectors in there. We got, chip help. We got all this stuff going on. I think that's also important to kind of factor in. But the other thing that you see a lot, like if you look at the Cleveland Browns, for example, is can you get Chase Young matched up on a center? Can you get Montez Sweat in a more advantageous matchup? And those are things that do encourage more pressure, but they're not incurring more risk in the back end. And you got to plan, you got to study, you got to game plan a little bit. But I do think that is that's something else, like kind of in terms of a sliding scale of creating pressure. Obviously, you can go, everyone remembers that engage 8 from Madden where you're blitzing 8 guys
Right.
and it looks all crazy. Or we can just kind of change the pattern of the rush up front, move guys around a little bit to ensure we're getting the matchups we want.
Yeah, totally. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. We're back at Tap Sports Bar this Sunday for the Take Command pregame show ahead of the game against the Falcons. Hopefully Logan Paulson Bowl 2 goes better than Logan Paulson Bowl 1 on the season, but we'll preview it starting at 10 a.m. Doors open at 11. Come join us. And if you can't join us in person, of course, we are live on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, and both stations' YouTube channels. Okay, Logan, I want to talk about a couple of individual players real quick, and then we'll get to the offense. If you're Ron and Jack, like, what do you do with Emmanuel Forbes? Because you benched him the other night. He's had issues. I think that some of these issues are probably solvable with some more discipline, some more reps.
So.
Some of them, I don't know if they're as quickly solvable, or are they more off-season things. So what do you do if you're them with your first round pick?
Well, I think just looking at some of the mistakes that he's made or some of the issues that he's had, I would say that while they're not good and the protection's not that good, I do think he's flashed some really good stuff in terms of coverage. Like even the one that's the explosive play to Moore, like he's in pretty good relationship. And I was listening to a national podcast earlier this week, and they were like, that's probably offensive PI. And I don't disagree with that. The way he kind of lowers his shoulder on the guy and creates the separation, that's going to happen. Like that's good route running also. So I understand why they didn't call it. But overall, he's in pretty good phase. The thing that I have been a little disappointed with him just in general is his just lack of physicality. And I think that's more of a mindset thing, just saying, hey man, we're in the NFL. Like, let's make that tackle, like let's be a big boy here. Let's make this tackle. I don't care if it looks ugly. I don't care if you're hanging onto his shoelaces. Let's get that guy in the ground. And I do think that's something that's just an effort thing and a mindset thing, an approach thing that can be fixed. And I don't think we're talking about it in the same context if he makes that tackle, right? There's the other one where it's a hitch and he goes for the PBU. I'm also like, hey man, like there's times and places to engage with super risky behavior. Like the one at the end of the game where it's 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2 and Fuller goes for the pass breakup on the hitch to Moore. I'm like, the game is on the line. If we don't get this stop, the game is over anyway. I'm totally fine with you rolling the dice there. Rolling the dice in the middle of the second quarter is probably not what I want. So I think all of these things happen when you have a young player. And this is one of the things that in my evaluation, I went back and checked my notes. I was like, he tends to gamble more than I would like in college. And he gets away with it because he's super fast. He's really long. He's very instinctive, and he makes a lot of plays. And so that's something you're kind of managing is the risk of his play style with the opportunity for explosive plays. Now it's about saying, and I think honestly, Chase Young went through a similar process early in his career. Guys are bigger, stronger, faster. They're more intellectual in terms of football IQ. The stuff you did in college just doesn't work the same way. It's not going to happen in the same context. So I think that's so important for players to understand. Like stuff I could get away with in college, no way I could get away with now. So one small example, the smallest example I can give you is just snap count. In college, you think you're getting off on the snap count. Wide 80 said Hut. I'd go on Hut. I'd go block my guy. In the NFL, I felt like I was late on every single block. And Cooley kind of came up to me and was like, "Hey man, when are you getting off on the ball?" And I was like, "Well, like when everybody else is." And he's like, "Come here." And he showed me the film, and he like freeze framed it. And I was like 2 frames behind everybody else. And I was like, "What the heck's going on?" He's like, "Go talk to the center." So I went and talked to Will Montgomery. He's like, "I don't snap it on set. I snap it on like the S of set." And so I was like literally a full word behind everybody in terms of cadence. And that's something that just takes time and experience in terms of understanding what you can do in the NFL. And it made me a better football player. He will go through a similar maturation. Now, I think it's frustrating because he's a first-round pick, but I think you see the talent that he brings. You see the upside, you see the potential. So for me, it's just about he's got all the physical tools from a coverage standpoint. Now it's just about teaching him, hey, let's use this technique when he's going to bump on you. Let's give him a little tug. Let's do this. Let's get in this position. Let's work my feet here in a better way. And I think those are all things that can be worked on and be corrected. It's just going to take a little bit of time, much like the grace we've given Sam Howell with some of his mistakes. I think you're going to see a similar thing here with Forbes. So I know a lot of people are like, he's terrible, he's a bust. I think that is such an overreaction. He's going to go through growing pains. He's going through growing pains. That's fine. The physical skill set is there. Again, I just would like to see him kind of engage with a more physical mindset on a more down-to-down basis. Like there was a play later in the game where they're running a GT, and he's the run player. And they've got big Darnell Wright pulling the corner. And he's standing there, and he just gets steamrolled. I'm saying, man, you're 166 pounds. Go cut that guy's thigh board. Like, let's play smart football here. You don't want to take that guy in with your face. Let's make a big pile there and let our tacklers come make tackles. But I think that's the stuff you need to see from him more consistently. And I think that stuff is not easily correctable, but I think there are technical things that can be done to make him more effective.
I think step one is managing his confidence. And that's just a very human thing. Like when you've been the best, and that like, this is what happens in college, in high school. And then in college, right? You're the freshman who comes in and you get picked on, and then you learn how to play. And by the time you're a senior, you're like, you're the one with all the tricks. Right. And all of a sudden you go to college and now you're the freshman again. And it's like, oh crap, how do you go? And then you rise up and you become a first-round pick caliber player in college and in the SEC nonetheless. And then you're just a rookie. Like no matter how good you were as a college player, you're a rookie in the NFL. And there's a level of ego and just like human management that has to happen if you're the coaching staff. And I do wonder, between decisions to bench or public comments, like how are they doing in that? And that is individualized. Like I crushed Rivera and Del Rio a couple of years ago for going after Jamin Davis the way they did, because I thought it was totally unfair. Turns out like it was actually the right play, because that Jamin's been a better player since then. And you know, how much does that actually have to do with it? I don't know, versus something else that clicked, but like he didn't, whatever it was, he didn't respond negatively to being called out publicly. Like that was something that Jamin at the very least had a neutral, but seems to have a very positive reaction to. How is Forbes in that regard? Every guy's different. And so we'll see as time goes on how that plays out. And I know you disagree a little bit on this with me, or a lot on this with me, but like, I think the weight's an issue. Like I look at that play and go, yeah, is it OPI? Yes, but Kendall Fuller doesn't get thrown as far. You know, Benjamin St-Juste doesn't get thrown as far. Like it's a simple massive, like it's physics. Like if you're lighter, a force is going to push you farther. And so I think the separation at some of the top of these routes that's happening, where he can't quite get back in the play and get a PBU or a pick, or it's a harder tackle to make because the receiver has a little bit more time to get his balance and make a move. Like, I think that's influenced by the fact that hasn't learned how to play in the NFL with this level of, like, it coincides with your point, right? It's at this level of physicality at his size. And he's either going to have to, in the offseason, put on weight, or he's going to have to figure it out. He's going to have to figure out different leverages and different things. And I don't mean leverage like coverage leverage. I mean like human physics leverage. Where's his body position to not get taken advantage of in those ways, the top of route when a guy throws you off, like, or you're going to have to get better at flopping and draw some more flags. Like,
well, one of the things I'd say just as a response to that is in training camp, we watched him like go up against Logan Thomas, and Logan Thomas is trying to big body him at the top, and he figured out a way. I think it was like soft inside shoulder, pull with left hand, break up here, right? Understanding of like when the contact is coming. So he's done it. We've seen him do it. He did it with Terry, did it with Jahan. Like he has the ability to do it. I think it's just about finding that level of consistency with the techniques that you see Fuller deploy or St-Juste deploy when they're getting that.
Like we also know that training camp physicality is different than NFL game physicality.
But like to me, like at least you've seen a roadmap for it, is what I would say. And again, like the physicality is different, but in one-on-ones, like when you're going for it, like when you're at like in those hyper competitive situations, I don't know, man. Going against Terry McLaurin in a one-on-one and finding a way to kind of manage that contact, I think it's not the same, but it's close, you know.
It's
And I think
close enough that I feel like he can figure it out, but he hasn't yet.
right,
And I think that's where we are right now at this point going into week 6.
and also like again, like the coverages and the rules and all that stuff we don't know, and so maybe there's some stuff there. But I do think, yes, I think the reason I'm confident that he'll figure it out, I guess is what I'm saying, is because I've seen him utilize some techniques and approaches that have allowed him to be in better position. And I think a lot of people, I can hear it in the comments already. I'm like, I've got like a sixth sense here. Like people are like, well, Christian Gonzalez figured it out. And I haven't watched a lot of Christian Gonzalez because I've been watching all this team. But what I would say is we don't know what kind of matchups Christian Gonzalez is drawing. We don't know what kind of coverages they're playing. And so like I look at Forbes and he's drawn some really, really tough matchups. A.J. Brown, that's a tough matchup. You know, DJ Moore, that's a tough matchup. And so as critical as we're being, like he is literally getting thrown into a crucible of fire here of having to play against really, really good football players. And I look at the A.J. Brown matchup actually, and I'm like, he was very competitive in some very physical catch situations. Like there was that comeback that A.J. Brown ran, and he tried to big body him at the top. And Forbes is like, no, dude, I'm going to use my feet. Here we go. PBU. And so he has shown an ability, even in big time against big time players, of managing that. But in that same game, you know, we talked about the double moves, right? So here it's like, can you bring some of that what you used against A.J. Brown against DJ Moore? And I think DJ Moore is one of those guys, quite honestly. He's not a big man. Kind of reminds me of like Steve Smith a little bit. I know he's one of your favorite players in the sense that like he's small, but he plays big. And so he
plays huge, and he's really tough to bring. Like in fairness to Emmanuel Forbes, tackling DJ Moore sucks. Yeah,
it's not like a fun thing. He's like a running back. So what I would say is like as you play more, you get to know what works. Like I remember the first time I played against DeMarcus Ware, and he totally sunned me. Like absolutely, it was like get out of here. Like what are you even doing on the field? And I was like, oh no, this is going to be a very, very difficult time for me. But you don't know. It's like you don't know. It's like the Matrix or something. You don't know the new reality until you've seen what guys can do on the field. And you don't get that oftentimes until you're on the field. Like I didn't know what 35-inch arms felt like until he just planted his arm in my chest. And I was like, I need to develop a plan for blocking people with long arms. And then you do something and then you're like, okay, this works. I'm going to continue to do this. So it's a process. It's a journey. I think he's fully capable of making that journey. It's just about, like you said, managing his confidence. And then him being a student of the game, which I think he is, having talked with him, and he's a good kid. He's going to learn from Fuller. He's going to learn from St. Juste, find what works for him, and develop, like Smoot always says, develop your file, develop your Rolodex on what guys do and how to watch film and prep for guys that are good football players. Like that's the thing about the NFL. Like you are going to see something, especially as a rookie, each and every week that you've never seen before from a physicality standpoint. And think about A.J. Brown, big kind of hulking dude, right? DJ Moore, super quick, sudden, kind of compact body style. Very, very different. You're going to see something different every week, and just about saying, okay, this worked against DJ Moore. That might also work against Tyreek Hill or whatever body type you want to compare, right? So I think that's a process that's going to take time, and I'm excited to watch it, quite honestly, because it's one of the fun things about rookies in the NFL.
To be clear, I very much agree with everything you said. Like, it's just diagnosing the problem, but I have a lot of faith in Emmanuel Forbes to figure it out. He seems like a tremendous kid who works really hard. He's really smart. Like, I think he will figure it out. My biggest question is like, how is he managed between now and, figuring out is an ongoing process that comes in layers. But how do you manage him in the meantime to keep him productive? Real quick before we get to the offense, bad news yesterday, no other way to put it. Derek Forrest hurt in this game. He's going to go on IR. He's going to be out for a while. Jeremy Reeves also hurt in this game. So you're now down not just Forrest, but potentially the guy you used to back him up. How do you Percy Butler has not had a very good year. PFF at least says. I mean, he's been near the bottom of the grades, and he hasn't played a lot, but he's given up some bigger plays. How do you see him fitting in? And then also Quan Martin, time to get your defensive snaps, kid. Strap up, time to go. How does this affect them?
I mean, obviously it's a big deal because I think Forrest is pretty good. I like what Percy's done. I think it's the same thing you run into. He's a young football player, and so he's kind of realizing what he can do what he can get away with also. But I like Percy. I like his approach. I like his physicality. And I think he's going to get better as you go. And I think, like we talked about the touchdown that he gave up and how I don't know if I'd coach him much differently, on the touchdown that he gave up in the game. I think you're relying on the rush to get there. But like to your point, your original point, this is going to be tough, right? You got a lot of people coming in and playing new spots. Depth at the safety position was kind of a strength. Now it's a weakness all of a sudden. You got Quan coming in, and Quan was basically playing backup nickel for a long time. And now he's got to learn all your safety rules. So all these things that make this defense good in terms of man match and aggressive combinations and who's rotating to the box and all those things that make this defense good are going to be much more challenging to do because you got a new piece back there. So how does he fit in? Do you put Cam back there and put him at nickel? We'll see. But again, there's going to be a little bit of musical chairs to kind of find the best combination of people to get on the field. But it's always tough losing good football players. And this is why coaches get paid and why scouting departments get paid, is what is the solution to this? And can you develop guys and can you get people where you want them to? So I feel really bad for Percy and for Reeves. So hopefully they get better quickly. But
for Forrest and for Reeves, Percy coming in. Excited for that opportunity. They called up Terrell Burgess from the practice squad as well. So there's your depth. And we'll see obviously how that affects special teams too, which hasn't exactly crushed it, although I think it's probably been fine. But Percy was obviously one of their main gunners, and Quan has been as well. So we'll have to see how that affects that. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulson with you. Subscribe wherever it is that you are watching or listening right now. If you haven't, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button. Helps us out, helps other people find it. Don't be selfish with the podcast. Share it with all your friends and strangers on the internet. But you don't have to do that like personally. You just hit the like button and then they'll see it. All right, so offense. This will be better than talking about the defense, but not necessarily in the first half. Part of that is opportunity, but they also don't have a ton of opportunity because they went 3 and out a couple of times. What happened offensively in the first half, and how did they eventually get things rolling?
Well, I just think it kind of shows you, at least in my opinion, this is one guy's opinion, how the offense is built. It's not like an explosive play, chunk play offense. They need to convert on third down. And I think that's something that is kind of intuitively obvious to fans. But, for example, the first third down they have, and they run that dive to B-Rob, and then Gates gets beat by number 97 on the line stunt or the run stunt and ends up being a tackle for loss.
Can we talk about that play for a second?
Sure.
Like, it's creative. It's different. If it works, everyone's like, that's awesome. Cool. Look at EB going 1940s NFL, running a pro set. But like, how many times did they practice that?
Well, that's kind of that is their short yardage philosophy. Like if you look at, what was that, Philly? Right, they run the same play, but I'm trying to remember who was in, but it's like B-Rob's at that, or it was Chris Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez is at the fullback spot, and they hand the ball to him, and he's able to kind of ride the wave and get the first down. I think you're trying to hide the back a little bit and sneak him in there. Personally, I'm like, if you have a run you like, call the run.
I just feel like they're not very confident in short yardage right now. Like they did the Logan Thomas QB sneak thing a couple times. Like they're doing. And I wish I had a better term for it, but they're kind of doing wacky bits in short yardage. And it's like, do you not just trust your guys to run duo or inside zone or whatever and get 1 yard?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's always where I've been philosophically, but Eric Bieniemy knows way more about this stuff than I do.
Remember on the staff, you have different people. You have like a short yardage game coordinator, one of the coaches, maybe Randy Jackson. I don't know. Randy Jordan, excuse me. Randy Jackson.
Yeah. Well, Randy Jackson, is he still doing American Idol? I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever he's doing. But he'll kind of be like, hey, I like these short yardage plays. And then if EB's a good offensive coordinator, because he's handling a lot of other stuff, there's a run game coordinator, pass game coordinator. They all kind of bring him stuff, and then he's able to kind of distill it down and find what he likes. So obviously they all made a decision, said they like this play. And I don't hate the play, I don't hate the play from a philosophical standpoint, but I'm just like, there's got to be a play that you've repped more, that you feel better about.
Right. Especially on a short week.
That's kind of what I would say. And again, they run this play out of different formations. So maybe it's the same play, just a different formation, and you just get got in a weird situation. I don't like that play. I don't like the fullback dive deal. Unless you're running like with a fullback, like San Francisco runs it a lot with Kyle Juszczyk, but he's in every play. So it's very, distracting, when Christian McCaffrey's back there. They run a motion. Everybody's looking around, kind of sneak it to him. Here it's like, guys, look what we're doing. Who's going to get the ball, do you think? And it's like, I know he's going to get the ball. B-Rob's going to get the ball. Like, you're not going to give it to Terry right here. So that's kind of
right.
my thought on that. But again, like, it's worked for him in the past, so I'm not going to be too critical of that. But you don't get that first down, and it ends up being a huge deal. And again, you don't get the ball back until what's the timestamp on that? It's something crazy. Like, it's like midway through the first quarter. You have 2 drives in the first quarter.
4:18 in the first quarter, you get the ball back.
So you have 2 drives, and then you go 3 and out off a sack on the second drive. So it's good offensive approach, but you got to make sure that you're efficient and effective in this offense. Like, they're just not good enough. They're not talented enough to overcome bad situations. Like, for example, when you watch Kansas City or you watch the Bills, for another example, they'll get in 2nd and 12, and you don't feel like for a second that they're in any danger. Here, just because the quarterback talent isn't Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. I'm not insulting Sam here, but like, it's going to be, it feels more laborious to get that back. So just making sure you're positive down in distances. And that's just like kind of football 101. But that, to me, that's the big crux is you couldn't. And the other thing I want to say too, you got me thinking here, Craig, is
it's my job.
Yeah. Is that I really felt like they didn't, at least in the first couple of drives, they didn't understand, or Sam didn't understand kind of what Eberflus was going to do. Eberflus is this very soft, very conservative coverage structure. And it's like, just check the ball, just spam the check down until they get out of that coverage. Like, that's really what you want to do. And I think it's the first drive of the second half. You see them, they throw a screen, ends up being a big play. Throw it to Gibson, ends up being like a 15-yard play. Because he's just checking the ball down quickly and being effective. And then Eberflus on that drive, I think, brings the pressure. But like, he wants to play these conservative coverage structures. And so I just felt like Sam didn't really get it. Like, there's a time where he's trying to wait for the corner. It's like, just throw it to the flat. It's 5 yards. Let's get in 2nd and 5, be at a manageable down and distance. Instead, we take a sack. It's 2nd and 12. And it's like, okay, now we're kind of boned. So I felt like there was a maturation from Sam in terms of understanding. And, I might be projecting, but that's what it looked like in watching the film. So that would be the biggest.
No, I think that's something that's like an offshoot of what we've talked about, where, we were kind of asking the question out loud rhetorically, like, has Eric Bieniemy learned how to call an offense for Sam Howell and not Patrick Mahomes, the guy who takes the most sacks per pressure versus the guy who takes the least? And I think part of that is obviously Sam helping himself. These are all multifactorial equations. Look at me sounding like a big old
there you go.
Usual. Wow. But like, that's part of it, right? Like, if you're in 2nd and 12, the other team's going to bring pressure, and you struggle with pressure. Avoid 2nd and 12. Take the check down. Like, some of that is on Sam, where it's like, yes, technically this is a deeper route concept, but if they cover it, fine, just take the easy one. Because if they cover deep, that means there's a lot of space shallow. Right. And so, like, these simple calculations that are very easy to sit in this comfortable chair in front of a microphone and say, and Sam has to do it in real time. Like, it is what it is, but like, that's his job. And so making sure, and I think that's going to probably be a continued point of emphasis for Tavita and for EB and for everyone who's in Sam's ear, and Jacoby and anyone else, is like, hey man, just do the Alex Smith. Don't go broke making a profit. Make a profit. And how do you consistently, even if you miss a big investment opportunity down the field, how do you make sure that you do not put yourself in bad situations? And part of that is the play calling. Obviously, can you, I think, more effectively use the screen game, for instance, is one area where I think that they've been successful in a lot of ways this year, and haven't necessarily used it as much as I would have thought. But also, running the football, being balanced. And Ron, for the first time, kind of said this week, he was asked a question about the offense, and his default answer has been basically, whatever EB wants to do is cool with me. And he, for the first time this week, was like, we got to make sure we stay on balance. We want to run the ball effectively. Like, it was the first time Ron actually said something about the offense. And so play calling, but also, to circle back to where we started here, like, Sam's got to help himself. And that's not just on the plays where he's facing pressure, getting rid of the ball quickly or whatever. It's not getting into situations where the defense can bring a bunch of pressure in the first place.
Yeah. And, I agree with Ron. I think you got to run. And because that's the other thing is, like, in the first half of this game, I don't think they ran the ball very well. Like, it was not a very efficient proposition. I think the best run was
different than the second half, where they didn't run it at all.
Correct. But I do think there is something to your point of, like, again, you see the offensive efficiency in the second half. Like, they were great. They were finding first downs, finding explosive chunks, and who cares if they're throwing the ball. But I do think you're just leveraging the offensive line and leveraging Sam a lot when you're not running the ball. Like, I look at the Chicago Bears, for example. I thought they did a really nice job of, we're going to run the football, we're going to be consistent, we're going to get into like third and manageable, third and shorts, and we're going to convert these things with plays that we really like in third and short situations. Like the third or fourth drive of the game, it was like, tush push, tush push, tush push, and they're all in like the kind of these short things, and that is not an efficient drive because they're technically in fourth down, but they convert a couple fourth downs with a very specific game plan play that they really like. So I think there is something to, and this is really hard for coordinators to understand. Like, it's hard for me at the high school level, is running the football it's not super efficient from an analytics perspective, but it is a low leverage thinking play that allows you to be more effective. And so that's something that, right now they don't have a very diverse, at least game to game, like running philosophy because they're in the gun a lot. There's not a lot of motions. It's very stagnant. But can you kind of start scratching that a little bit, peel that back a little bit? Can we get in some different personnel groupings? Can we get into some different backfield sets? Can we use some different, jet sweep type setups? And that's something where, even though the run game doesn't look super efficient, I think to your point, and it's something that I think the Rooster brought to our attention, is can we just kind of scratch a little bit, see if we can find some plays that get us in better angles, get us in better situations to run the football and make that a little bit more efficient, and be okay with that newfound efficiency. The screen game, the bubble teams, the quick game stuff, that's all been a nice addition. But, I think the run game, there's times where I'm like, man, I think there's more meat on the bone, especially, given how the offensive line blocks. And I think everyone's going to come out of this game and say the offensive line played terribly. Like, because I kind of thought that after the game. But when you look at their grades on PFF, and when you watch the down to down film, like, there are some beautiful pockets, and you're like this.
I don't think they played poorly. I would say they run blocked poorly in the first half when they were run blocking, because they ran 6 rushes throughout Robinson had 6 rushes for 10 yards. He averaged 1.7 a carry. And by the way, that he had a 5-yarder in there, so his other 5 carries were 1 yard on average.
Very efficient.
And then Sam has 4 rushes for 19. Those are scrambled, but they literally ran 55, I think was the number, straight pass plays. It's the most or called passes. It's the most in the history of PFF since 2006, as they started tracking this stuff in terms of called passes in a row. Sam obviously runs a couple of scrambles in there, but they weren't good. But I think at the end of the day too, like, 2nd and 8 is better than 2nd and 12. And sometimes that's the math. Like, forget all the analytics and, kind of the new ways you can frame that data. At the end of the day, I'd rather be in 2nd and 8 than 2nd and 12. And like, sure, can you get in 2nd and 12 in a run play? Yeah. But like 2nd and 14 means something went really, really wrong. But that's just what happens if you get sacked on 1st and 10. Like, 2nd and 14 actually ain't that bad of a sack even. So like, how do you stay out of 2nd and 14? You run the ball. And even if it's a 2-yard game, like 2nd and 8's a down and distance you can live with.
Yeah. Well, I think what an analytics person would say to you is that, like, because of the penalty of holding, the penalty for holding is so great right now. It's a 10-yard penalty.
True.
And they're called at a very high rate, like, relatively speaking to other plays. That's where you get that negative variance that you didn't see a couple years ago. But to your point, some of the most efficient offenses in the NFL right now are running the ball like over 50% of the time, which is something I never thought I would see. But Kyle Shanahan has the highest run frequency of any team with the 49ers, of any team in the NFL. And again, they have a quarterback that's kind of supposed to be a passenger this year. They find ways to get explosive touches, and they run the football with a diverse bunch of offensive personnel. And I think that there is something to be said. Like, our passing game is solid. I think there's no doubt about it. We want our playmakers on the field, but can we get to some more creative runs? Even in that 55-play sequence, I'm really surprised they just didn't run a draw. Just run a draw. Like, here's a draw. Right. Let's run it right now. And then let's see, just to alleviate some of this, the pass rush being like, it's a pass every single time.
Yes.
But I think in that second half, to your point, like, they did some really good stuff in terms of finding, like, Sam was excellent in terms of finding big time throws. There are times where I think he gets a little bit antsy. He's vacating clean pockets. He's passing up stuff right now, like on the second 2-point conversion, the one that he doesn't scramble in the following one. There's Antonio Gibson is wide open on the angle route. That happened a couple times in the game where you're like, that's a miss. Like, why didn't you see that? That should be a throw. The one to Diami on the post versus Tampa 2, you call that play expecting Tampa 2. The Mike linebacker's kind of in no man's land. Diami's over the top, and you missed that throw. There was a couple of those in there, but I think overall you feel pretty good about Sam in the second half. But I think to your point,
and that happens. Like, we used to complain about that stuff with Kirk. Like,
yeah,
that happens with every NFL game. Patrick Mahomes even misses. You know, whether it's missing a throw physically or missing a throw mentally, decision, you know, to throw somewhere else, or you don't see something like that. Stuff happens.
That's a great point.
It's built in, but it's just, you know, when the margin of error is as small as it is because your defense gave up 40, like, those things become bigger deals.
And I'm not saying he played bad. I actually think he played pretty well.
Yeah, I think Sam played pretty well.
But he's very competitive. And again, those are things that will get better as he gets older and as he matures and as he gets a better feel. And I know that's like a frustrating thing for fans to hear, but I think he's very talented. I think he's a good football player. He's not the best version of himself today. And I think he will get better as you go. But I think the O-line played fine in the second half. I actually think they played pretty good. I think Sam played pretty good. I thought the receivers played pretty good. The problem is they didn't really play football in the first half, right? You get a bad interception after you have a nice long drive that goes 8 or 9 plays that ends up in the field goal, then you throw a bad interception. And that interception
on the first play of the drive.
Yes, and it felt like you had a little bit of something going. And think about, you go down there, let's say you score a touchdown, it's 10-17, and it's like the complexion of that game looks dramatically different. And so as much as we want to give Sam his flowers, like, that's a bad mistake. And I think he's thrown it late over the middle. Don't love that. Again, the first read's dead. They were kind of bracketing Logan Thomas in the slot because, like, they like to run that choice there with him. But again, those are situations where it's learning when the play is dead and throwing the ball away or taking a sack. Even taking a sack there would have been better, right? So there's a couple plays like that throughout, but overall, I think you feel pretty good about it. And it feels weird saying that in such a bad loss. I think the reason why it feels weird is because that first half was just so poor. In the second half, you see all the positive things this offense can do and can be. In the first half, though, you kind of see the worst versions of it. Them not converting on third down, them not getting the ball back to the second half, having one good drive, turnover. Then you go into halftime. That's it, folks. That's all you did in the first half. Hard to win a football game when that's the production. So
100%. Oh, and especially when, you know, obviously we know what happened on the other side of the ball. You don't have a chance. You didn't give yourself a chance offensively, and your defense didn't bail you out. Let's I want to zoom out even further, like the farthest we can, to kind of wrap this up here quickly. When you lose 40-20, it's national TV. It's pretty embarrassing. And immediately, no matter what actually was the truth on the field, people are going to be like, they didn't try, they didn't want it, the effort's not there.
Right.
Like, do you have any concerns about kind of the mental state of this team? Or when you watch the film, was this a team that played hard but made mistakes and got their butts kicked?
So I think, obviously, and when there's a blowout like this at any level, like, there's going to be stuff that isn't good, right? There's going to be stuff where you're like, that effort could be better. I remember, I just watched it yesterday, but I left the game film going, man, the D-line played hard. They played hard. They played physical. And I know a lot of people didn't feel that way. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, like, they converted a 3rd and 7 and 2 3rds and 7 running the football. And to me, they got you with the pen. They run a trap on 1 for a gain of 6, tush push the next play, first down. You're in 2-3 technique. So you're really wide in the middle of the field. You run basically a dive, and the linebackers are dropping out because it's 3rd and 7. It's an obvious passing situation. It ends up being a first down. So they kind of got you. Like, that's what you like to do on 3rd down. It makes sense. You want to increase your pass rushing efficiency. You get got. But overall, I think that group, even against the run, played really good. There's a couple plays, I think, there was an explosive play where they're running an ET. So N goes inside, tackle goes around, that gets washed down. Barton gets caught up in the wash, ends up being an explosive play. But it's so funny because we're talking about like 5 plays in the course of a whole game, and everything else, I thought the defensive line did a good job. Obviously, the secondary, I think there's, that's frustrating. It's frustrating, it's to have that level of production. But in terms of effort, it's not like I don't see guys not trying or guys turning down tackles. Like, St. Just is an animal out there, right? And so from an effort standpoint, I think you're okay.
Yeah. And what about sometimes you can see the stuff on film because the TV camera will cut away and give you a hero shot or a replay. Like, a guy's barking at each other, guys snipping at each other. Like, how? Like, it's really kind of a wellness check, in the locker room. And this to me is like a really important question moving forward. And when we talk about the uncomfortable thing of like coaches getting on the hot seat and things like that, it's like, oh, as long as everyone's still bought in, like you just got to correct the mistakes. And I think that is where we are, is like they're still bought in. They're 2-3. It's week 5. Everyone wants a head to roll because it was embarrassing. And yeah, they've lost 3 straight and it's bad. And there's a lot of stuff to correct. And I think there's real questions about, do they have the people in place to correct them? Sure. And like, why, defensively, for instance, why is this happening again? Another slow start. But I do think it's worth pointing out, even if it's unsatisfying and people are going to get mad in the comments section, bring it on. Like, I don't feel like this is like an effort issue. I don't feel like guys need to figure out how to make plays. That is a different story, right? Like defensive line, you're playing well. How do you make a play? If you're, on we've talked about the touchdown to Moore on the cover 2 situation. Like if you're Kendall Fuller there, like, can you just be a football player and go make a play and see that and draw? And it's not your responsibility, but like you see that something bad's about to happen. Can you fall underneath that throw and at least get a hand on it or challenge the throw? Like there can't just be like we lost and there's no solution to it on a touchdown play that you give up. That's not good enough. There's, what's the best possible outcome? And I think that's what needs to be figured out by this defense, especially defensively, is like, how do you get better outcomes? But that is football. That is the NFL. That is not something extraordinary, not something remarkable in any kind of negative way.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, in some way, this is going to sound crazy to people, but in some ways, these losses are good because it really forces you to, like, as a coaching staff, be very self-reflective and be like, what are we actually doing here? What are we doing to put our guys in good positions to be successful? Because we thought, they put this game plan in thinking it was going to be great, and it wasn't. So it's like, well, maybe this guy can't cover the way we thought he could cover. Or maybe this is too challenging. Maybe the rules are too hard. Or maybe like in this situation, when he's in this alignment, he can't rush as well as we need him to rush. So these types of losses, if the coaching staff is correct, and I know EB, I've known from college, like we talk when we're in the building, like talk about a guy who is going to use this as a motivation to get this team better, right? I think that's right. I think Jack has an element of that too. He's hyper competitive, right? If they take this the right way and the team takes this the right way, this can be very, very positive. And I know that sounds insane, but it forces you to kind of do a reality check. You have a little bit of a mini bye here coming off the Thursday night game. What were our projects? What did we study? What did we look at? Did we look at explosive runs from other teams? Can we put any of that stuff in? What are our coverage structures? What are our coverage rules? How does other teams do what we're doing? So as much as people want to say like this is terrible and it's not great, I'm not defending the loss.
Not good.
It's not great.
When you start 2-0 and then now you're 2-3, that's definitively not good.
It's not great, but I think this can be very good for kind of building a platform to say these are areas we can improve in going into the second quarter of the season. And if you come out of the second quarter of the season with a winning record, the whole thing's on the table for you. And I think that's what Ron's saying, especially given the strength of schedule. So I know fans, it's hard to picture that, but in the locker room, like if they handle this the right way, this can be very, very positive. And, like I think about 2012, like we had that bad loss to Carolina. Remember that loss? It was like right before the
Ron
bye.
Rivera's Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and it was right before the bye, and Mike was pretty much like, we got to reevaluate everything, personnel decisions, the whole thing. And we came back and the groups were really focused and we played really well the second half of the season. And with that staff, that team took that loss the right way and were able to parlay it into something more. So I think this game against the Falcons, which we're going to preview in a couple of days, is going to be very indicative of that.
Yeah, I think to your point, to like distill it down to the most important thing, it's like, do you learn how to put your players
100%.
as a staff?
100%.
Do you learn how to put your players in better positions? Because you're currently asking them to do things that they clearly are not capable of in the ways that you thought. And so
Correct.
we will figure it out. We will give hypotheses on how that matchup goes with the Atlanta Falcons on our next podcast. Make sure you are subscribed to get that 2 days from now on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, of course, the free Odyssey app. Between now and then, check out Take 5, our 5-minute version of Take Command. And of course, I'm on the radio for a lot more than 5 minutes every single day on the Team 980 427. We also stream that show live on the Team 980's YouTube page. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.